What do the front pages say? Well, let's find out together. We're starting off with the Nigerian Tribune. The Nigerian Tribune is talking about ways and means this morning. It's been a while you heard that expression, ways and means. As of time, ways and means was the headache of a lot of Nigerians because they saw what the former government did and they went, what? No way with this ways and means.
Maybe you tell them what ways and means for those who are not tuned in.
Okay, let's take a look at the story and I'll break it down for you. So this is what you have on the front page. CBN frustrating probe into 30 trillion naira ways and means. So that is coming from the Senate panel. And you're wondering ways and means, what is it? Well, you see, when Nigeria needs money, there are different ways Nigeria can get money.
I like this class. Go ahead.
But you see, Nigeria can borrow from itself by way of printing money from. So it's borrowing from itself in some sense. It's funding itself, but it's borrowing from itself and its future. It is creating money where there is no money in that sense. So that's what ways and means is. And the former government, we understand, was very versatile.
It was very generous. The CBN was very generous.
It was very generous. I understand that the Senate is trying to probe that. In fact, this has been added to our debt now. So this is part of our debt because there was no value for the money being created. And that's a challenge with printing a lot of money. So what exactly or how exactly is the CBN frustrating this probe?
And there goes accountability again.
In addition to what Kayode has said, so the ways and means, as we speak, has been securitized into all of these bonds that you can now borrow, you know.
I recall last year, October
30
1,
or
the
40
president
years
had
down
erroneously said that 30 trillion naira ways and means
that
had been cleared. It was not true.
You just securitize, and it's okay to securitize it. So basically, they overdrew from the CBN, and that's what Kayode is trying to say. In fact, I think what made it 30 trillion is the fact that interest has accrued. Because you're not supposed to borrow more than 5% of the previous year from what you generated that
according
revenue.
to law.
But they broke all the rules.
Because they said it was force majeure, that this was an extraordinary circumstance.
They were actually really broke because revenue to debt to revenue
90-something
was 97%, 98, 97. So you have like 2% as free fund to run. But that's where we'll give this government a bit of credit. I can be critical of this government. This one, they have tried by pushing that number way down to about 68%. So you have a lot of free funds to play. What they are doing with that free up money is a different kettle of fish. But for reducing it, I think kudos to them.
And many have attributed, debatably so, that the inflation we're witnessing now is as a result of the ways and means funds by the former administration, secured by the former administration.
Definitely. If you pump money into a system like that, even America had to deal with it during COVID. During COVID, a lot of people couldn't go to work, so those interventions, those monies that were given, you have, economics is like water to find its pond. There will be inflation. Kayode, do you have another story on this?
Well, quite a number of stories, really, but let me just take one more. And it's at the top corner of the front page. Senate is just, you see it very soon. Senate probes Natasha's conduct, may suspend her as she sues Akpabio aid for 100 billion naira over alleged defamation. I'm not going to get into this one. I saw that story and I had to reread it again. 100 billion naira. I'm not sure. I think this is the first time that I would see a senator suing a fellow senator, in this case, the Senate president.
Well, the Senate president doesn't have immunity, but I think if I read that story correctly, is what the aide wrote.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it should be careful because the language was very improper.
But he says that the aide, that particular suit said the aide must have written it on the authority or at least in the name of the Senate president. That's where he comes in.
They'll sort all of that out in court at the end of the day. So the aide has to be careful.
Not necessarily so, without holding brief for the Senate president, but it may not necessarily so. We know time and again
but that's
how
what the suit
aides
says.
Of politically exposed persons can be
says.
zealous in their work of protecting their principles.
Well, it now has to account for using language, according to some of the language I can't even use on air. The whole issue of suspending and that, I don't want to go into that. They'll sort themselves out. But that issue of the suit, and sometimes the Senate president doesn't even help the matter in helping to defend him sometimes. In correcting her yesterday, he still made another statement. And I'm listening, I say, oh God, Godswill Akpabio, dear Senate president, calm down. Calm down, because while he was talking about rules are rules, these are these, that is that, it was very clear. Then he now mentioned that it's like, all these courts, more like courts returned or courts brought in senators or lawmakers, they are responsible for some of these things. It's like when we're doing orientation, since they were not here, they were busy fighting in court. That kind of, you shouldn't have had that.
Oh, goodness.
You shouldn't have had that. I just don't know. You know, he said his words sometimes just puts him in trouble. He's trying to correct the situation. He will not say another thing.
And you know, trying to put humor into it. Not everybody takes it.
Yeah, he likes to just maybe just
He's
make
a
it
jolly
light.
good fellow.
Yeah, like there's too much tension in this place. Let me throw humor.
Let me throw humor.
We like the
and
tension.
And then the humor now gets him into trouble. Anyway, Bukola, let's go to the Vanguard, Abby.
Okay, so it's the Vanguard we're headed to next this morning, and it shows a different part entirely. Look at the headline: Insecurity, how lack of surveillance tech aids criminals, terrorists, and there are a host of riders there. Look at this one: Nigeria's 490 million naira failed CCTV project, fueling insecurity in FCT, others. You know, and that was where I was headed without initially even taking a close look at that rider. What happened to that CCTV project? Of course, there's more to chew on from this particular one. Abductions for ransom, now order of the day. CCTV contractor vanishes with 490 million naira. Aliru, 7th House of Representatives said project abandoned. Failed projects, national embarrassment. That's ascribed to ex-DSS boss. We've strengthened security agencies to meet emerging challenges. That's, of course, ascribed to the president. And, you know, kidnapping for ransom becoming the order of the day is in spite of the tireless efforts of the administration in the FCT and, of course, the police command in the federal capital to rein in on the situation. We know that several arrests have been made, particularly in the last 1 year. We hope that, of course, there's progress on this particular one. But it's an interesting story that Vanguard chooses to lead with this morning, and it is very, very important.
All right, so let's get to now the Guardian. Jonathan Jega carpet politicians, judiciary over, carpet politicians, judiciary INEC over flawed elections. So if you want to get details of that story, you can go to the page 6 of the Guardian newspaper. And then there are other ones as well. I'm trying to pick which, because the Natasha story is that the APC begins 2027 groundwork as Tinubu governors, party leaders meet on internal crisis. So on that one, of course, the former president of Nigeria, as well as and then Tahiru Jaga, who made the call in that election as well. I've been talking to everybody involved that perfecting the electoral process is in the interest of everybody. For the fact that your party is a beneficiary of a flawed system, you should not defend it. If it gets better, all of us, because you will lose tomorrow, you will win the next day. So that's how this thing works. But APC is doing their caucus meeting. They started yesterday, and eventually, finally, they're now doing their neck meeting. The guys at the PDP were still waiting for them. So. Finally today, APC is going to hold its neck meeting. Finally. So neck meetings are supposed to be held every quarter by literally all the political parties according to their laws, which is why Rufai has been shouting there's no internal democracy in the party, because that's where they sit down to talk to themselves, quarrel with themselves, disagree, align the government policy with the program of the party and all of that. But finally, they are done caucus yesterday. Today is going to be next, so we'll see what the outcome will be and how they are repositioning for election. But guys, before we just leave this, because the GDP numbers are out, 3.84, quite impressive.
That's from Q4 2020.
From Q4, but in the entire year, I think it's about 3.4. But if you crunch the numbers year on year and the big levers, the big movers, I'm not really impressed. You see that food are still contributing the highest in 24% or so. And then you have the back and forth between trade and telecommunications that always revolve around 15, 16. But how I look at those numbers is not in the big contribution, is how those sectors grow year on year. So you can see food is still doing what we call relative year, 2014 to 2024, 2025, 2023. They're doing about 1%. Some are doing less than 1% and all of that.
Well, Jeffrey, beyond the numbers, I'm looking at the impact on the generality of Nigerians.
Telcos actually was a big loss.
Very hard to see the quick gains, the low-hanging fruits for Nigerians. Nigerians are still struggling.
Of course, that's a fact.
of the economic policies of this administration.
That's a fact.
So, numbers are just what they are, numbers. They stand very little as evidence to prove that indeed Nigerians are having a good time, with this administration's economic policies.
All right, so guys, where do we go from here?
I think naturally we can go to what you are saying about what is trending, and naturally the case between the Senate President and his colleague, Senator Natasha Akpoti-Odoanga, is the very first one. She has since sued the Senate President and his aide for apparently his 1.3 billion.
We're hearing all sorts of numbers.
There's 100 billion
somewhere.
And there's a
and there's
compensation for litigation
and
fees.
there's a 300 million, I think. So together that's 103. But you know what? We'll take you through all of your comments regarding this. We'll take a quick break, and when we return, there's a lot more to talk about, particularly with the economy, the impact on production, on those indices that affect you and I. That's the moment. Stay with us.